Hello, my name's Ellie. I'm a chronic pain specialist, if we haven't met before. And today in this video, we're going to be having a little look at what is fascia exactly and how does it cause pain. So let's start by saying that fascia is a connective tissue, and it's kind of like a web that sticks to everything. So if you think about an orange, for example, and then you think about all of the white bits in the orange. So first of all, you've got this sort of thick outer layer of that sits beneath the skin. And then it also divides the orange into segments. So you have those bits between the segments and the bit that runs through the middle. And then you have like all the really spindly bits that go into the segments of the orange itself. And that's a little bit like how fascia works through the body. So that white stuff is like the fascia. It's this connective tissue that lives under our skin. It surrounds our muscles and our organs, and it runs through them as well, just like the white stuff runs through the orange segments. So it's this big kind of connective web that connects everything together. However, unlike the sort of the white bit of the orange, fascia isn't dead. It actually is very much alive, and it has the ability to contract and release and to rebuild and repair. It's really adaptive. So amazingly, your body can actually like lay down extra layers of fascia if it thinks that you need it in a certain area. And this is where we can actually start to get into problem zone, but we'll come back to that in a few minutes. Basically, just a little bit more about the anatomy of fascia. Between each layer of fascia is a kind of crystally liquid substance called hyaluronic acid. And what this does is allows a glide and between the layers, which gives us a freedom of movement. So it's just important to remember that, because we'll come back to that a little bit later as well. So another note on the sort of anatomy of fascia is that fascia is what we call innervated. So what that means is that it has the ability to feel pain, and it has the ability to feed that back to the nervous system. So it's not just our muscles that we feel pain in or on our skin, this big web that covers our whole body is actually able to feel pain as well, but it has a nerve supply to it, so it can do that, and it can feed back to the brain pain and discomfort. So fascia is something that wasn't actually seen as important in the body until a few decades ago, when anatomists started doing different things during dissections. They started storing the body differently. Basically, rather than let the bodies dry out, certain anatomists started doing different things with preserving them. And that's when they were able to see just how important the fascia system was, and how, because they were able to see how it was reflected in a real life human body, whereas in the past it was just seen as this sort of substance that wasn't just there but wasn't any use at all. And this has really seen a big shift in the scientific world from seeing the body as separate structures, like just your hamstrings or your glutes, as all being separate, to actually coming into an understanding that everything is linked together, and that we have these kind of chains of fascia systems running through us, connecting all of our muscles with our joints, etc. Excuse me. So let's just have a think about how this relates to our head and our jaw. So we know that this connective tissue surrounds all of the structures of the body. So of course, this will include the jaw joint itself and the two bones that make the joints, and all of the muscles that surround the joint of the jaw. And then joining on from that, we have the muscles and the other structures. So we've got all this muscle group here, and then we've got other structures up here, and then we've also got the neck below. So you really start to think about the jaw not just as this separate entity that opens and closes, but that is connected to what's above and below it. And then we can really start to think, why is the jaw dysfunctioning? Why is there pain there? So as we mentioned earlier, fascia can actually get stuck, and it can get stuck in two different ways. So the first way is that it can dry out, so that there's a lack of movability in that acid there. And then when it dries out, it can become immobilized. So there isn't a nice flow between the layers of the fascia. And that can cause stiffness and tightness, and basically really lead to an unhealthy system. And another way that the fascia can sort of be work against us is that, like I said earlier, it's capable of laying down extra layers. We'll talk about that a bit more in a future video, because it's a lot to go into right now, but basically those layers can cause restriction. So just going back to the jaw again, because I always want to keep taking this back to the relevance of the jaw and headaches and that kind of thing, because I know that's a lot of what you're all experiencing. So every time we can sort of think globally, it's nice to bring it back to how that actually relates to us on a day-to-day level. So if you imagine that on one side of your neck, you have this sort of fascial tightening, so this inability for a lot of move and glide. So there's kind of tightness here in this area, for example. So it's likely, if that's the case, it's likely that the fascia is restricted there. And again, we'll go into depth in future about why that might be, because that's a whole different topic on its own. But if you imagine that there is a restriction here, and then when you think about how everything is connected, like it is in the orange, then it kind of doesn't take much imagination to see how, if this is tight here, then that pulling can start to come into play. So that pulling on the jaw joint here and the muscles of the jaw. And then, there's also the muscles of the head up here. So this muscle, for example, acts on the jaw. So you can see how this could be pulled down by the jaw, which is being pulled down by the neck. And really that process over time, even often a number of years in most of the clients that I work with, actually causes a lot of misalignment and stress on those muscle systems and dysfunction, really. So that's really just an example of how fascia can work against us. It is actually an amazing material that enables us to walk, move with ease, communicate to our brain about where our body is in time and space. But when it goes into dysfunction, and so when we start to have unhealthy areas, then it can cause us a massive amount of pain and misery, really. So it's really important to maintain that fascial health. And the good news is that, all is not lost. So it can be, that healthy system can be brought about again. So just to leave you with that fact, really, that it's not the end of the world if the fascia system isn't particularly healthy. It's something that we can do something about. So what I'd really like to know from you is if you've come across this concept before, or if it's new to you. If you're really sort of quite familiar with yoga, you might have heard fascia talked about in that community. So have you come across fascia before? Do you understand the concepts? Do you have any questions on it? Let me know, and really, I'd love to hear from you on that. Okay, speak soon.